Do you recognise this claim that the blob is actually in charge?
Yes, I think, it's to be fair, it's an exaggeration, it's hyperbole, but I know what that means. A lot of ministers defer to their officials. You don't have to be rude to the officials. I've been a minister myself. You need to be polite to them, so I'm not saying they should be, poor things, bullied by a minister, but they do work for the minister.
Yes.
This country is a democracy. And the important thing is they understand who's in charge. But a lot of ministers are unable to exert their authority and simply become letter signers and submission signers for the civil service. And I think that has been, 13 years in power, that has become a problem. I think the Prime Minister needs, at a cabinet meeting, to make it clear to ministers that he expects them to govern and to lead, not
Advisors
just to have the civil
ministers
service
decide,
telling them
right?
what to do. I mean, you have this problem with immigration, for example. I mean, huge numbers of migrants coming into the country, which put services under enormous strain.
Well, let's come on to that in just a minute, because I know we're going to go on to migration. Very quick word. Oliver Dowden's potential role in this witch hunt against Boris Johnson. Should there be an investigation as to whether ministers have been involved in making these referrals to the police on the back of his COVID diaries?
No. The government should not be having investigations the whole time into itself.
No.
I think this
Are they having too many investigations?
They shouldn't. I mean, the Prime Minister should just make a decision in support of the government that we are just going to march on and deliver for the public, not have investigations into allegations about what ministers may or may not.
Especially when the public arguably has moved on, right, from Partygate. Now, sorry, you did refer to migration. It's the front page of the Sunday Express. It's basically the stat of the week, isn't it? That 606,000 figure. In your mind, Alexandra, is that too high?
Well, it does, by the way, include students.
Yeah. Should it?
Maybe it would be better to exclude the student numbers from the figure, or at least explain how the figures are calculated. Secondly, there's the Ukraine and Hong Kong factor as well. That's nearly 200,000, I think, of that 600,000.
But in general, when you think about being a former minister, and the government has made a pledge to the public in the 2019 manifesto to keep those numbers below 200,000. Should they just have a cap?
Below 100,000?
Well, to be fair, in the manifesto it's below 200,000 because by that point it reached 246. It was David Cameron that pledged below 100,000. Right. But, I mean, these are perhaps semantics. In general, do you think it's politically expedient, particularly for the Tories, to just place a cap on numbers?
Yes, I think there should be a cap. A cap in the different categories, a cap on skilled migration, a cap on resettling refugees, a cap on family reunions. Why is
Sunak always wanting to resist that, then?
Because the more migrants you have, the better the GDP figures look, although that can be misleading because you need to look at the GDP per capita figures, not at the overall GDP figures. But, you know, business departments, the Treasury, are clearly in favour of high migration. But how do you service such huge numbers of people? The NHS is, as they always say, under pressure.
Yes.
Schools and other services, the roads are getting clogged.
I mean, politically, they seem to have offset this and are saying in their own mind, as you say that they should go for growth. This is Jeremy Hunt's, key plank of his economic policy, is as much migration as we can fit in.
You achieve growth through improving productivity, not through bringing in cheap labour.
Yeah. And talking about Labour, just to move to our final story, Alexander, as time always races on this show, it's the Labour announcement of the day, Starmer to ban new drilling in the North Sea. That's on the front of the Sunday Times. Your reaction to that idea?
Yes, this is straight out of the Australian Labor Party's playbook.
Right.
They will have advised this so you have green credentials. Of course, the consequence of it is that gas and oil will be imported rather than come from the North Sea, which will have balance of payments consequences. And by importing oil and gas, that's not going to make the slightest difference to global CO2 emissions, which is meant to be the issue. So it's a classic case of virtue signalling trumping practical policy.
Do you think this whole idea about phasing out petrol and diesel cars by 2030, the net zero pledge, do you think that's political lunacy, or do you think it does gain votes on the right?
I think is entirely poll-driven,
Yeah.
but it'll never happen. I mean, the European Union has had to abandon its target of electric vehicles by 2030, or theirs was a bit later, I think it was 2035, but they've abandoned that. The UK will have to abandon its figures. There's no way it's going to be achieved by 2030.
Alexander Downer, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much.